we're gonna do things a little bit differently. I know I said I was gonna bake these in my oven at 1,000 degrees, but I think I'm gonna show you how to do it if you don't have one of those ovens. You can use a propane torch or whatnot. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, we're gonna take those foils. We're gonna put about 175 to 200 milliliters of distilled water. Let's try around 175. Be careful, the melting dish is still really hot. Not quite as much as last time, because last time I just kind of dumped it in, but hopefully with each refining I'll get a little bit better. I'll be back in a little bit once I get more of a reaction. All right, I'm gonna add a little more nitric, and then I think I'm gonna give you guys a time lapse of the reaction. I'm just gonna slowly add it in. And remember, we're doing this outdoors because I don't have a vent. All right, as you can see in the time lapse, I'm able to control it a lot better doing gradual nitric doses. Instead of just dumping in 30, 40 milliliters at a time, I'm literally dropping in 5 milliliters, 8 milliliters, a slow, steady drip. And then every once in a while, I'm taking the distilled water, I'm rinsing down the sides, and I'm making sure there's enough distilled water in the solution for the base metals to go into, because if you don't have enough distilled water, the metals are going to have nowhere to go. So I'm just going to keep on slowly adding the nitric acid, and every time it hits the hot metals, it poofs up a little bit, and then some of those fumes start coming off. So I'm sure you could see before when I was fast forwarding it, it was going from dark red to clear, dark red to clear. That's every time I'm adding nitric. So I'm gonna keep doing this until I have no more base metals. Now what I'm gonna do this time is, unlike last time, I'm gonna keep on cooking this. I'm gonna cook this as long as I can. I feel like I didn't let it cook enough my first batch of my last video. I'm gonna cook this until I have absolutely no more reaction, because I think I actually had a little bit more base metals that needed to be cooked off. So I'll be back. So my beaker's about half full. I'm about 2 hours in. We have about 150 milliliters of nitric acid. The rest of the fluid in there is distilled water. I think what I'm gonna do, instead of risking a boil over, I'm gonna burn off the rest of this nitric acid until I have no more reaction. And then I'm gonna show you guys how to decant some of the liquid off the surface. So I'm basically gonna, once this is all finished, I'm gonna add about 400 milliliters of distilled water, and then I'm gonna let everything settle to the bottom, and then I'm gonna take a hose and I'm gonna decant this fluid into another container, and I'm gonna show you how I do that. I'll be back in about half an hour. All right. I don't know how well my videotaping skills are gonna go, but what I'm gonna do, I added some distilled water, I let that settle. I'm gonna take a hose, preferably, if you had a thicker, better hose than this, a thicker diameter, it would work better. I'm gonna put some water in this. And I'm gonna do like a gravity gravity funnel, so I want to make sure there's no air in this. Keep on. All right, plug it up, hold one end here, and then I'm going to drop the other. Perfect. Now I have a lot more room in my beaker. I'm going to add some fresh distilled water and more nitric. And just to let you know, this fluid that I drained off, it's going to contain some silver in it. So what I'm going to do is I have a big beaker with a little bit of copper, and you let it sit in the beaker with the copper, and you'll actually get silver that'll precipitate onto the bottom of it. I'll show you that in another video, but that's what I do with this solution that I siphoned off. I'm going to add about another 100 milliliters of distilled water. And then we're going to just freshen this up. We're going to add some new nitric. And now I have a little more room in the beaker where I don't really have to worry about it boiling over. So I can add a good amount, probably 20 to 30 milliliters now. Get a vigorous reaction ready. Put a lid on it and keep on cooking in a hot diluted nitric solution. All right, I went through about 225 milliliters of nitric. I was just showing everyone that when I buy this, I buy it in bulk. I buy it in these large jugs. You want to keep them in dark, cool places. Before I open this, it's crystal clear. When it's crystal clear, that's how you know it's really, really good quality and it's really fresh. Over time, when the light hits it, it starts to kind of turn an orangish hue. But when I first opened this, it was crystal clear. I like to leave it somewhere cool and safe where no one will touch it, where it's dark. And then I fill up these little Regent bottles, and these are what I use. So whenever I use nitric, I use these little 500 milliliter Regent bottles. See the way it has like a yellowish hue to it though? It used to be crystal clear when I first purchased it. And this bottle, I bought a lot of these in bulk. It's probably a few years old. And these little Regent bottles with these little stoppers are great. All right, I cooked it down till there was no more fume production. I cooked it in hot nitric for quite a while, several hours. I did it longer this time than I did with my last batch of gold-filled material, so we'll see if it really makes much of a difference. So I'm gonna filter out these foils, just like I did before. Remember, wet the filter. And then once I filter these foils out, we are going to rinse them really good with distilled water, and then I'm gonna cook them in a melting dish in my little oven inside at 1,000 degrees for 1 hour. I'll be back once these are filtered. So this is a great learning experience. I cooked and cooked and cooked, but let me see if I could zoom in. If you can see, I still see a little bit of base metals in some of these foils. Like that right there. See a little bit of silver pieces right there. So I guarantee you if I took a magnet to these, there's still some base metals in here. So unfortunately, as much as I don't want to, I've been cooking this forever. I have this completely clean. I am going to actually put it back with a little bit of distilled water and keep on cooking. I feel that if I do this really, really good on this step, next step, I should only need to add it to Aqua Regia once, because these foils will be really clean. And I think that's where I messed up with my first batch. I feel like I didn't cook them long enough. It takes a lot longer than you think it would. So I'll be back in a little bit and I'll show you where we're at. All right, I added about 150 milliliters of clean distilled water. It's crystal clear, so now if there are any metals, it should have a lot of good clean water to dissolve into. And now we'll see if we get a reaction. I really think we're going to, because I still saw base metals, so I can add a pretty good amount of nitric. I'm going to add about 30 milliliters all at once. Let's crank the heat up a little bit, put a lid on it, and we should start to get fume production, because I really think that there are still base metals. So we're going to keep on cooking this. We're getting a little bit of fume production, not much. I'm going to continue to let this cook. I'm going to add a little bit more nitric now that it's starting to heat up. Yeah, I'm definitely getting a little bit of fumes. Add some nitric. And I'm going to probably just let this cook for another hour. And I'll see where we're at in an hour. Just checking back in to show you, now we're getting pretty aggressive fume production. So there definitely was still some base metals I didn't realize, but we're definitely getting quite a bit of burn off. So it's a good thing that we did this. Like Street Tips always says, the longer you could put it in hot nitric, the better the final product will be. Sorry about the wind, I am outside. Just look at this. I was nowhere close. I mean, we're getting a pretty vigorous reaction. Almost all the foils are just floating on the surface now. They're much different looking. If you can, go back and look at my other gold-filled refining video. I believe it was the first or the second one. And you'll see that they look like full shells. This is literally just flakes of what they used to be. So I've been cooking this a long time, almost all day. I guarantee you when we put this in Aqua Regia, tomorrow it won't be today, it's gonna look much nicer. So I'm gonna say I'm pretty much done. I'm gonna filter this out, get it in the filter, get in a little melt dish, and put it in my oven for 1,000 degrees for 1 hour.